Hi everyone, let's do task 3 of the NMR challenge together today. It's a really simple spectrum. So we have our molecular formula, which is C5H8O. And as always, you need to calculate the double bond equivalents or degrees of unsaturation first. So you take the number of carbon, 5, times 2 plus 2, so that's the expected number of hydrogens if there were no degree of unsaturation, and you take away the number of hydrogens plus halogens or whatever there, and the number of oxygens here don't really contribute to the difference in number of hydrogens because oxygens only form 2 bonds. So and then you're going to divide it by 2 because each double bond or ring you form, you're going to lose 2 hydrogens, and that gives you 2. So you're going to have either 2 double bonds or one double bond in a ring or 2 rings, but judging by the number of carbon here, which is quite small, we're not going to have 2 rings unless it's an extraordinarily rare circumstance which we don't expect at first. So let's just go with either 2 double bonds or 1 double bond and 1 ring. So here we can take a look at the proton NMR first. So we see that all 8 hydrogens are accounted for here. So these 2 peaks, you don't need to bother about them. Like when they don't label peaks like this in the NMR challenge, it means that impurities or solvents. So you just need to care about the labeled peaks, the ones with the integrations, because those are the peaks that have like quite a high count. Like they're not impurities because you have the hydrogen count and they're quite large and proportional to each other. So yeah, so we see that both are below 4 ppm. So both are, we know they are sp3 carbons, the hydrogens of sp3 carbons. So we know that there isn't going to be a CC double bond that has hydrogens attached to them. So we know that we are probably going to have a CO double bond and a ring, because you can't have a CC double bond and unless you don't have, like, unless you have something like this. So there are no hydrogens attached, but judging by the number of carbons here, we are not going to go with that option either because we only have 5 carbons to work with. So the simplest solution we have is just, we have a CO double bond and we have a ring. So how large is the ring? We see that we have 2 peaks, each of 4 protons. So we know that 4 protons are equivalent to each other and the other 4 protons are equivalent to each other also. So that implies a degree of symmetry inside a molecule, and we can just have a think about that, and the easiest solution we can come up with is this one. So the 4 protons of a higher shift is probably these 4 protons and the other 4 are just down below. So yeah, because obviously you can't have 4 hydrogens attached to a single carbon and still have the whole molecule. So that's our answer. Now let's see how the 13C NMR shows that we are correct. So here we have a really highly shifted peak here. So that is probably going to be this carbon here, because it is part of the ketone, and ketone carbons are usually just above 200 ppm, and this one might be particularly highly shifted because it is in a slightly strained ring, a 5-membered ring instead of an open chain, so it might be shifted very highly. And the other 2 will simply be the pair of carbon here and the pair of carbon here. You usually don't integrate the 13C NMR spectrum because it is really difficult to do that, and so we usually don't do that, so we don't know their integration, but we know that there are only 2 peaks here, so they have to be this pair and this pair. Yeah. And another thing I want to mention is that since this is an APT, we know that all the carbons with an even number of protons attached will be pointed in the same way, and all the carbons with the odd number of hydrogens attached will be pointed the same way as well. So here we have the CDCl3 solvent peak. So this peak has so this carbon, CDCl3 carbon, it has 0 hydrogens attached, so that's an even number of hydrogens. So we know all the even number of hydrogens carbons are going to point up, while all the odd ones are going to point down. In this case, we don't have any odd ones because, as you can see in this molecule, there aren't any carbons with an odd number of hydrogens attached. So yeah, so that's explained. And another thing I want to point out is usually the carbons with no hydrogens attached will be slightly shorter than the carbons with hydrogens attached on the spectrum. So here we see that each peak corresponds to a carbon with 2 hydrogens attached, so they are very tall peaks. Well, this one is a small peak because it corresponds to this carbon, which doesn't have any hydrogens attached. Of course, this isn't a hard and fast rule, so expect exceptions. So, but usually it works. So that's something that might be quite handy to you when you see more complicated spectrum. And so the point of these videos is not just to get the right answer. It's more like to develop the tools slowly for you to solve more complicated spectra later on independently. So yeah, these are very simple, but slowly the difficulties will increase because on the website they have like simple, medium, and advanced spectra. So I'm just going to work through them one by one and hopefully be able to build your NMR knowledge up slightly every time, and hopefully you learn something new every time, and then maybe we can solve a very difficult one in the foreseeable future. So that's my goal, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one. I hope the next one will be on organic. So as promised, I will be giving some examples of SN1 and SN2 reactions and when the nucleophile abilities come into play. And I'm going to go through E1 and E2 reactions definitely. Then after the organic reaction, after these 4 basically very important mechanisms, maybe I'm going to move on to oxidation and reduction reactions because they are quite important, as you know. And then maybe I'm going to talk about protecting groups a little bit and also real syntheses. And after that, we are going to be done with organic chemistry basically. So after that, I plan to go through physical chemistry, but I do not know when that is going to happen because that's going to be something that's quite math heavy, so I need to figure out where to stop the math at. So yeah, so there will be updates. Just stay tuned, and well, I've been talking for too long. Hope you have a good day. Goodbye.